My name is Agiliki Ghazi, and I was invited to be the chair of this plenary session entitled Towards an Enabling Environment for Community Media in Cyprus. As at 2008, I applied a proposal for university radio at the Cyprus University of Technology. At the moment, we're almost ready to broadcast, to start broadcasting officially. So, as you can assume, I have a strong interest about community media in this island. Moreover, I am one of the founding members and the vice chair of radio research section of ECREA, and I'm very happy today. To meet here in Nicosia colleagues and old friends from radio and community media field. Before giving the floor to Vanya and Nico, and as we all listen the speeches, the deliver speeches, I suggest to think a little bit, to think about the specific situation here in this divided island, and trying to put the various perspectives in the core, to place the various perspectives in the core of this specific situation here, in order to bridge the communication gap between the two communities. So I will give the floor to Vanya and Nico. You have 15 minutes both. So please start your presentation.
Okay, thanks. It's always incredibly courageous to start talking. Oh God, I know I have to stay. That's the disadvantage of talking to community and radio people, right? They always tell you how to use the microphone. Well, I'm even more courageous than this, because I at least wanted to show you this slide, which tries to capture the notion of community media by presenting 4 different approaches. Now, I'm not going to elaborate too much on this. The basic idea, what I want to convey with this slide, is that community media as such is a concept that hides quite a lot of diversity, and there are different approaches which all become unified in this concept of community media. There's this idea of serving the community, but there's also the idea of being an alternative to the mainstream. There is the idea of being part of civil society. Some authors actually call community media civil media or civil society media. All these concepts are floating around, and of course we all have to have our own concept at the same time. So for that reason I introduced the notion of rhizomatic media, which is about creating networks and about creating linkages between media organizations, alternative media organizations, and civil society. I think that community media actually play a vital role. If we then start looking at community media, I think this notion of community deserves a lot of unpacking. We always refer to community media, implying that there is something as a community out there. And that's, of course, utterly problematic, because there is not one community, and that community is not one. Communities are quite heterogeneous, and members of, or people that are involved in community media are very different. They all come together within that kind of environment, but they do play a role of difference, and that is actually the point that I'll try to make in this very brief introduction. But another way of looking at community media is a location, a site, where people from different communities meet, which is a slightly different take on this debate about community media and their communities. The idea is that there's not one community they serve. It's actually a diversity of communities. That allows these communities, however you want to look at them, that allows these communities to become involved in this meeting place, which is the community radio station or television station. It also allows them to communicate their diversity to the outside world. So they play an internal and an external role. Of course, this is not an easy thing, and I should not be the one telling you this. This is actually a pretty complicated process with lots of issues and lots of problems. This is not always working that nicely, but it is still offering quite a lot of opportunities, including opportunities for peace building and processes of reconciliation. Now, when I put this slide in there, Paya told me that nobody would be able to see what's up there, and she's absolutely right. My answer was that that was not my intention. What I wanted to do was to show you all the networks and all the communities that are built around just one community radio station. And this is their network. It's an attempt to map the complexity of all these networks. This is about diversity in practice, and that, I hope, I did manage to convey, despite some internal debates about this famous slide. If we put these things together, though, if we look at what community and the role of community can be, it opens up opportunities for creating dialogue. It also, because of its participatory and democratic nature, it opens up for a respectful type of dialogue, which is more than just sitting together and chatting to each other. So, obviously, community media can play a vital role in peace building, conflict resolution, and reconciliation. In many cases, that is exactly what they've been doing. Now, talking as a researcher, before I shut up and give the floor to Vaya, talking as a researcher, one of the most striking things that I discovered was that there's hardly any research on this combination of community media, peace building, and diversity. There are many other fields covered, but this is a rare field for academic researchers to move into. There is one important exception that just got published. It actually was published a couple of weeks ago, and that's Clemencia Rodriguez, her work on citizens' media against armed conflict in Colombia. This is a very significant example of this kind of research. But of course, there are many, many projects in practice, but nobody in the academic world actually seems to care about them. And let us then see if we can bring some of these ideas to Cyprus.
Talking about some basic characteristics of the media in Cyprus, we can say that they share a lot with the media in other South European and Mediterranean countries. Unavoidably, they reflect or are intertwined with the Cyprus problem. Well, it's not paradoxically, the media, both in the Greek Cypriot and Turkish Cypriot community, focus a lot on the Cyprus problem, that is basically the continuing division of the island. And one characteristic is a similar way of coverage of the Cyprus problem, not so on perspectives and positions, but mostly on rhetoric, framing, and interpretation practices that result in the construction of the mediated reality its side creates. As several researchers have shown, the Cypriot mainstream media do not force a reconciliation between the Greek and the Turkish Cypriot community. Rather, they embrace a conflict-centered approach when they cover the Cyprus problem, and practically they contribute to the deepening of intra- and inter-community polarization, serving thus the binary oppositional scheme of us versus them in national identity building. So, given the capacity of community media to foster dialogue and participation, as Nico has presented, the implementation of bi-community media in Cyprus, serving both the Greek Cypriot and the Turkish Cypriot community, could give voice to and promote the dialogue between the members of the Greek Cypriot and the Turkish Cypriot community, could offer diverse and alternative representations of the Cyprus problem, contributing thus to peace building, conflict resolution and reconciliation within and amongst the two communities. considering the type of community medium that could work better in the Cypriot reality and be adapted to the particularities of the island. The idea of a bi-community radio serving both communities, based in Nicosia, the divided capital city, the capital city that divides but also unites the two communities, is an idea towards that direction. The reasons for that are diverse, but mostly, well, radio is a relatively easy and cheap medium to produce, and it reaches a large audience easily. And apart from that, familiarity, immediacy, and materiality of the medium are important elements in peace-building processes. Also, we're talking about a bi-community radio station, but we should have in mind that also all the, let's say, traditional media function in a more and more converged environment with new technologies. So a community medium as such could be enhanced by the use of new technologies that support interconnectedness, sharing and expression of opinion. For example, a radio website could engage people from remote areas or from abroad, as many Cypriots live abroad. Also, young people that someone would presume that they would be more active in engaging in community or bi-community radio station experience the practice of active participation and citizenship largely through the mediated use of the internet and of mobile technologies in, let's say, converged environment and culture.
So I think that basically the summary, and I'll just go to a quick conclusion, not to go on forever and to please the chair. I'll still have 25 other slides, of course, but that's usual trick we play with chairs. To go to a conclusion, I think one of the major issues, if one believes that it is possible to establish a bi-community radio station here, one of the issues is to what extent should foreign and, well, non-local institutions be involved. There is a very long tradition, and we've been talking about this before, a very long tradition of just putting the radio station there, financing it through donor agencies, and thinking that the problem will be solved. And that kind of exogenous creation of media initiatives for peace building has turned out to be actually utterly problematic for a wide variety of reasons. At the same time, I still think that it's possible to organize these kinds of interventions if a number of specific conditions have been met. I would argue that a process of establishing a radio station like this should be participatory in itself. So instead of just sort of dumping the radio station there, saying, well, this is the way it should be done, the process of establishing the radio station should be part of the participatory effort itself. Otherwise, it will never work. Again, this is also, and that's a second concluding point, it will need a very reflexive component. If these kind of processes are rushed, if they are organized too quickly, they will not work. Peace building is something which is necessarily slow. Organizing a peace building initiative on the short run is actually doomed to run into problems. And having a more reflexive component will, in a way, protect a process like that, especially if it is supposed to be participatory. Now, one of the tools for doing that, and that's really the last thing which I should be sort of mentioning, one of the tools to do that is called, it's a methodology, an academic methodology, it's called action research, which unifies a more interventionist approach with a more reflexive approach. And that would be, I think, talking as an academic, but also partly somebody who has some experience in the field of community radio, I think that would be one way ahead to establish a project like this, and that would involve, I think, a very extensive consultation and deliberation of all stakeholders here on the island. Thank you.
Okay, we will. I'm going to present to you. I'm a media education teacher. I'm teaching in two English schools, and my association, the International Children Film Festival of Cyprus, is one of the founding members of CCMC. This association has been created 8 years ago, and the first thing we have created is to implement a film festival for all the children of the island, so for all communities. And I agree with you, we're not talking about just the Greek Cypriot community or the Turkish Cypriot community, we're talking about all communities. Okay. This association is also implementing a media education project, and embedded in this association, I'm going to present you our last media education project called the Cyprus Artifacts Treasure in Action Project. So what you're going to see on the slides is all what happened during October and February, and these images are all the children from Paphos and from Augusta who came together to participate to this project. So this project there were 3 objectives to this project. It was done, no, I'm going to talk about it. It was a partnership with other associations. The first association I would mention is HDR, Association for Historical Dialogue and Research. This project has been illustrating a very, very interesting collection, archaeological collection called the Aya Irini collection. Half of the collection is in the Cyprus Museum that is in south. It's just like a few meters from here. And the other half of the collection is in Stockholm and in the, who can say? Yeah, you can say.
Medelhavsmuseet.
Yes. This is the Mediterranean Museum of Stockholm. And this collection has been explored by Swedish archaeologists in between 1929 and 1930. All the story began well, in June 2010, when I went to Stockholm and I had one idea. I wanted to visit the other half of the collection. And this collection has always been amazing, and it's an incredible collection. I don't know if you can see some, yes, you can see some photo of the collection. And this collection is about this collection is in Aya Irini, and is situated in North Cyprus, next to Morphou, and now the village is called Agdeniz. And the archaeologists founded around 2,000 terracotta figure, and they're all different size, around semicircular altar. And even now, the archaeologists don't know really what were there for. Either, worshipping or war, and because you have just 2 female figures, and the other are male, and you have some chariots and some bulls and everything. So so we did that with, this is why HDR was involved, because HDR is an association dealing with historical issues. The other, I have implemented this project also with 2 associations in both communities. In the north, I've been working with Famagusta Culture Center. It's in Famagusta. It's an association dealing with implementing project for children, because Famagusta is very far from Nicosia. It's 1.5 hours, and they don't have a lot of things to do. And the other association is in Paphos Youth Center, and is also implementing things with children. So, and this program has been supported by Communal Support Program of the American Embassy. So the objective was to let the people of Cyprus, both communities, meet around these artifacts, to explore and to exchange about this fantastic archaeological collection. So it was their heritage, it's their common culture, and to make them illustrate, to make them create a media product illustrating this archaeological culture, and then therefore facilitating and encouraging the intercultural dialogue and peace building. I don't know if you're aware of the Agenda of Paris that is implementing the basis of media education in Europe. There is the second recommendation in the Agenda of Paris is that media education should reinforce citizenship and intercultural dialogue and diversity. So we were exactly in the middle of what media education should be doing. So we have been implementing this project during 1 year on 3 levels. The first level was done with HDR, and we have been working with, I've been working with some teachers and archaeologists from both communities, and we have prepared 2 pedagogical documents who are here on this collection. One is a booklet for teacher, and the other one is a booklet for children. The whole thing was to give the tools to the teacher to be able to visit this fantastic culture, this fantastic their history, and to be able to do that in class and to work around that. You know that, as you were saying, history, teaching history in Cyprus is not a really easy thing. It's always something very tricky, and we, our 2 associations, decided to put guidelines for teachers to give them more objective and suitable for both community way of talking about history. These teacher packs they have been published in English, in Greek and in Turkish, and will be disseminated in all schools, public and private school. Just to tell you that Cyprus is not easy. We had a discussion when we were doing these things, because in North, the place where the Ayarini is Agdenis, and we were working with really fantastic people. And you know, when people, all these people who are coming to work on bicommunal project, they really want things for the country to happen. But at one point, we had a very rough discussion between the Greek Cypriot community and Turkish Cypriot community, and some of the Greek Cypriot teachers said we can't have that printed Agdenis in the Greek Cypriot communities, and we were like, why? Because, and they're saying, because it's a name that was given after 1974, so we can't print that because we will not be able to use this in our school. No way. They said we will not use that. We can't. Even if they personally wanted, their authorities and the way it's built, they will not be able. So we had to put like in the English pack, all the 3 names were there. In the Greek pack, 1 name, and the Turkish pack. It's just to tell you that things are never simple, and that people who are really working to make things happening are really doing their best. So this was the first level. The second level was the implementation of this illustration of the Ayarini collection by 20 children. 10 children were coming from Augusta, which is there, and 10 children were coming from Paphos. So you take the two opposite towns, and you try to put them together and to make something. The media product I wanted to create with them was the animation film, very short animation film. The project started, first of all, I went in each community with a media maker, and I forgot to say that CCMC was very involved in the project. Sorry, CCMC. And a media maker from CCMC helped us. And so in both communities, I went with a media maker of the community, and we did like first 2 workshops to prepare the common workshop. The first workshop was giving the children the basic grammar of a camera, use of camera, of basic what's an animation film, how is it working, and everything. So okay. And the second thing was to visit the museum, because of course the children had to choose an artifact to make an animation film. And I did that in both communities. Then the children came together, and it was in Nicosia, and they made animation film together. The third level, I'm going to go quickly because I want you to see one of the animation film. And the third level was one with my students in my media education lesson, and I have an example of they made an interactive book around implementing an artifact of this collection, so you'll be able to see. But now I think maybe, because I just have 4 minutes and I really want you to see the film. So basically, media education to implement intercultural dialogue, not resolving Cyprus problem, but concentrating on we are discovering something together. There's something is our common culture, the IIENI collection. We're working together and we're producing something together. Therefore, to build sustainable relationship and a real media, a real Cyprus artifacts community. This project is going to have a second phase because the parents, all the little films you can see, well, they were presenting at the last edition of the closing ceremony of the film festival. And the parents were there. We want to continue. Parents taking their children from Famagusta and Paphos. It's 2 hours and a half and 1 hour and a half and saying, we want to continue. We want our children to do something together, and they made friends and everything. So we can watch maybe one of the animation films done by the children.
One of those resources on the website that I just indicated, white papers, includes a rather dated but 2002 issue of the Community Media Review that I edited that has a lot of discussion about the rethinking of what was at one time a very naive philosophy on the part of the U.S. community media people. And I think this documents the change in that, in some of those notions. So U.S. public access TV, if we look at the philosophy, it shares a lot of similarities with what was happening with and based on, is built on much of the things that were happening around the world. So in this non-critical phase, they have these naive notions of power and free speech that if you just open the door, then everybody will be wonderfully served, and we can somehow, what was found out was that it reproduces these social inequities if you have these naive notions of power. So starting in the 1980s, certainly building on critical work from Europe, the ones that jumped out at me early on were Bibby, Denford, and Cross in 1979, a classic critique of community TV in Britain, and the Council for the Development of Community Media in Montreal, their great article, The Community Media and the Ideology of Participation. So the 70s and 80s was globally shifting away from these naive notions, and this was reflected in U.S. Community media, away from the individual right of the speaker to more of a collective right of social good for speaking and hearing, and moved to this sort of outreach model of social organizations. Along with that were sophisticated notions of power, democracy, and the public sphere, and a recognition that community media is a process over this product. And what is the process oriented towards is a notion of community dialogue over mass audiences, polished programs, and these tech toys, somewhat like the ones we're working with today. And focusing on media education literacies, and even looking at the politics of media training methods. So this is a shift in the US that is certainly not limited to the US, and many of you in this room have written at great length about these, and the resource list that's on the handout is certainly selective, and there's an awful lot more. So I thought that what I would talk about, just to continue with this here, is some of the challenges. We do have the internet. It is remarkably engaging and inclusive. But we do have a potential loss of geographic community in the loss of what some people really argue is the basis of community-based media, a geographic community that can meet face-to-face. We also have, particularly in the United States at this time and in the past few years, using the internet as a rationale for funding cuts for community media from local municipalities and state, and certainly the large media companies argue that they shouldn't have to support what they've been forced to in the United States for decades now, because they can go to the internet. And we recognize that it can encourage individual activity that's going to be removed from collective social action. So you think you're doing something because you posted it on Facebook. Some of the challenges the CCMC is facing, like many places around the globe, is sustainability and funding when that drops from the UNDP, and how to have really sustainable funding. And I think that part of what this conference represents is an opportunity to share lessons learned in the Cyprus context, the CCMC, and sharing challenges to this global community media. So with that, I hope that the bandwidth of my audio wasn't too annoying, and I appreciate your patience, and it's wonderful to listen to these discussions today and through streaming, so thank you very much.
The example from the film example was absolutely fascinating, and one thing, of course, it demonstrates that these sorts of divisions are transient. It may not seem that long ago, 1974, but in the context of artifacts which you find around this island, it's a blink of an eye, and you can but hope that that's what it will be seen when somebody looks back on it in a couple of hundred years' time. But I think it does demonstrate that complex shared past is also an opportunity for greater collaboration and development in the future. John managed to battle with technology successfully, and I think it is true to say that our understanding of community media and what community media is about has changed and developed and matured dramatically over the last 20 years or so. Clearly defining the position of community media in the context of other media is something which, if you look around Europe at some of the early legislation for community media, community radio in particular, and I would use, for example, some of the legislative examples in Scandinavia, they are really, by today's standards, quite primitive, and they don't clearly define what the role of community media is in the broader media context, and that is a weakness. But I also like his point that community media must be seen primarily as a process. It's something which is developing and responding to outside stimulus and to inside political developments. I absolutely take on board the point that the internet can be used as a very convenient excuse for not doing things with proper broadcast community media. We don't need to go into that here except to recognise that it's a spectacular con that people try to pull off in many jurisdictions. And I also liked his point about simplistic power relationships. You know, we understand in community media that if you think things are black and white and simple, you're probably missing out on something. Christos gave a very good overview of why broadcasting law gets to be a tangled web and very complicated. I think pluralism in broadcast media particularly is essential. Any single monopoly situation of whatever kind is just inviting problems, but there has been a very clear recognition in legislative developments recently that a bipartisan or a bicameral system with public service and commercial of itself is simply not enough, and that's where the gap for community media exists. But regulation is founded on complex principles, and it's impacted by politics and economics, and clearly that can be seen in the development of media on this island. To wrap up, as I say, things aren't simple. If you think they are, there's certainly something wrong. And I think that it is important for people in community media to understand that point about existing power relationships, where they exist and why they exist, and to challenge them, to come up with other ways of looking at situations, to come up with other scenarios. And I would say that by not playing by those rules, by doing things a different way, by being politically integrated, by taking on board the principles of democracy and having a shared, clear outlook on where things are going, community media creates opportunities for change. And I think that CCMC clearly demonstrates that. Thanks very much.